If you ever see you're spending more money to get a customer than they pay you in the whole life, you know you have a problem. If you look at nothing else in your business, look at this. This is actually more important than net margin, because if you are spending more money to get customers than they are paying you, you do not have a business. You have a charity. If you've had your business for any length of time, somebody somewhere has probably told you that you need to pay attention to data. You may just not know what that means. I'm Melissa Franks, your host of the Opt-in podcast, and this is where we go from surviving to thriving in business. Today, we're going to be talking about vanity metrics, and you may not even realize that what you're looking at is categorized that way. In fact, social media is doing a wonderful job right now of indoctrinating you, of communicating to you what it values, what it rewards as a metric you should track, and it's confusing. It's kind of hiding the plot, if you will, and your business is going to end up in trouble if you are focusing on what everybody is focusing about. Here's what I'm talking about. If you have been on social media anywhere in the last 6 months, you have likely seen multiple posts where somebody is talking about how much revenue they made in a launch, how much revenue they made in a year, that they're a 7 or 8-figure business owner. And what they're not telling you is the real details. They're not telling you if they actually made any money. They're not telling you how much they invested in order to get that result. They're not telling you how much they deposited in their personal bank account at the end of the day. And those that don't talk about money talk about team size. They start talking about how many people they've hired. And the new novel thing is how many AI employees somebody actually has. Now, controversial take on the AI employee is what that communicates to me almost immediately when somebody says that they have 25, 50, 75 AI employees and they are not in the AI education space. It indicates to me that they're spending more time working on behind the scenes things because it's easier to do than the hard stuff, which is actually growing the business and selling. Am I right? So today we're going to break down exactly what vanity metrics are, why you're getting caught in the trap of looking at them, and then what to actually be looking at inside of your business. Now, some of you may have come here because something that I have offered for the past few years is the 5 metrics that every business owner must track. That's going to be included in the show notes. So you're really going to be able to get a look at the bare minimum, the things that you really need to be looking at. Now, some of you may fall into the category of like, this isn't the podcast for me. I don't need to listen to this conversation because we already have a dashboard. We're already tracking information. Once a month, I am with my team and we look at things that tell us how the business is doing. That's great. And my challenge to you is going to be that maybe, just maybe, you're looking at the wrong things. Maybe, just maybe, your team isn't actually communicating to you the information that you need to be looking at in order to grow your business, take decisions, and head in the right direction. So I want you to consider today that if you spend the next few minutes with me, that you may learn a little bit more about how to track data in your business and what it really takes to steer your business with data long term. Are you okay with that conversation? If so, let's get to it. Here is the first way to spot a vanity metric. And a vanity metric simply is just something that you can brag about. It's one of those big marquee things you can say out there. And the reason that it's a vanity metric is because it doesn't actually change how you move in your business. So the test is as simple as, does this number change any decisions I make? If it went up or it went down by 20%, would you then take a different action? Would you evaluate anything? And if your answer is no, then it's just vanity. It's just there for your ego. It's just there to make you feel better or make your team feel better or for you to brag about on social media. It's really meaningless. And you may now be thinking, man, I don't know that any of the data points that I look at help me drive my decisions. Frankly, your bank account balance may be the thing that drives the most action in your business, good or bad. Because if you're feeling good about what's in the bank, you may pull back a little bit. And if you feel bad about what's in the bank, you may put your foot on the gas. Because that's real. That's a real number. That's real information that you can take with you. These vanity metrics get distracting and they can have you lose focus on what matters most in your business. So examples are total number of opt-ins or signups, the number of email addresses that somebody's given you. It's interesting, it's helpful, but you have no idea if they're even qualified people that want to buy what you're selling. Another one that I love is social followers. This one is so distracting. It does not matter if you have 2,000 or 200,000 followers. What matters is the integrity of the follower. It matters that they are people that are bought into whatever you are communicating about, and that ultimately they're going to become a buying unit or somebody that buys whatever it is that you're selling. Just because you have a ton of people following you doesn't mean you have a ton of people that want to buy, and you need to know the difference. In fact, I had one client that I was working with that had a huge following. And when we decided to start offering something that was in more of the education space, the first question became, well, why do they follow you in the first place? And what we realized was that they weren't following to learn how to do what she does. They were following because they liked her. And that is two very different things. We couldn't isolate how many of this humongous following actually wanted to buy stuff from her. And it was like starting the business over from scratch. We stopped worrying about followers and we started paying attention to those that were giving us buying signals long term. Another one that can be very misleading, we talked about this at the beginning of the podcast, is gross revenue. That's how much money comes into the business, but it doesn't tell you how much money you actually keep, right? It just tells you the top line number, and then there's a whole bunch of things that happen to it as you go down the value chain. And then the last one that I want to talk about is website traffic. That's interesting. It tells you people are hitting your page. It tells you that people are coming to your website, but you need more data points than just website traffic to tell you if it's traffic that actually is valuable to the business. So while it's interesting to know that you've had 10,000 visitors in the month, what you actually want to know is what did they do once they got there? That's the interesting data point. The traffic is just vanity. The action they took, now that is the true data. I want you to think for a minute about that client that I just shared with you who was very proud of the follower count. In fact, that follower count had been used over and over and over again, as well as views on videos and posts and engagement, all of these social metrics. And when we went and we started to ask questions and we started to interrogate, well, what does that mean? How is that going to translate to sales? What we realized very quickly is while it felt really good to have those great numbers, when we looked at even the email list, it was significantly smaller and the people were disengaged and nobody opened the mail. And so what we had to do is we had to look at the landscape and say, we don't care about the social footprint anymore. We actually need to focus around getting people engaged that want what we're selling and will move through our process. It was an entirely different spectrum, and we had to stop paying attention to the numbers that felt good in order to pay attention to the numbers that felt bad, so we knew what to do about it. We had another customer that we started working with, and this was a big one. When we started working with this client, they were the biggest client to date that we'd had, 30 million in annual revenue. We're like, wow, this company is so big. And we were there to help them expand nationally. It was a really great opportunity. And so we got into the business and we did all of our onboarding, and we just kept hearing over and over and over, 30 million, 30 million, 30 million. We're like, wow, it's so cool. And then once we dug in, once we started to build compensation models for the sales team and determine what sort of investment we were going to need to make in order to get the right people and get them attracted and et cetera, we realized that the company didn't have the cash to sustain the growth model. Well, we realized that the business was actually operating at a 2% net margin. 2% of 30 million is what stayed inside of the business. There was no wiggle room. There was no margin to invest in a sales team that would take 6 months to ramp up and start getting sales in the door. And when we further interrogated what was happening, we realized that what the business was selling, they were selling it at a price that was too low. And as we brought all of that information to bear in front of the owner, what we realized was that we couldn't actually help at all. And so our engagement was quite short with the business because they had to go fix what was broken before they could ever think about expansion. And that is why paying attention to vanity metrics like gross revenue is so dangerous. Because one would think that a $30 million annual business could grow nationally. But it could only grow nationally if it had the appropriate cash flow, if it had the appropriate net margin, real metrics. And once we uncovered what those were, we realized the decision was the wrong one. And instead, the priorities needed to shift to getting the business more profitable so that it could grow and expand over time. Now, you might be wondering, okay, so if vanity metrics don't steer the business, if they're not helping me take decisions, if they're not sending me in the right direction, then why are they even around? Why are people even talking about them? Friends, frankly, it's because it makes you feel good. It's something that can be counted and that you can hold up to the public at large and say, look at this, I'm doing a good job, I have a good business. I will tell you that being able to hit those huge milestones, the first time you hit 7 figures in a year, it's a big deal. But if it doesn't come with good metrics underneath, it's short-lived and it really starts to put strain and stress on you, because what you're communicating to the outside world, what you're using to measure your success and your happiness and your joy and all of those things, isn't grounded in reality. And those two perspectives, those two differing places are going to start to cause friction and stress on you as a human being. So vanity metrics are often used because they're easy to measure. They're things that are easy to count. They're things that everybody knows and understands. You can use them at a dinner party or at a backyard barbecue, communicate them, and people are dazzled by them. Partially, they're dazzled by them because they don't actually know what they mean, because they don't actually mean anything. But it makes them tempting to report and communicate and share publicly because they are so easy to find and communicate. They also protect the person telling the story. Here is what I mean. It is much easier for you to say out loud, our traffic is up 40%, than to say, our conversion is down 12%. Right? It feels so much better to say, we're growing, we have so much traffic. It doesn't feel good to say, we're actually contracting, we're trying to figure out why conversion is down. And your team, if they are presenting you vanity metrics, what they have learned is that you don't push back as much when they're getting good news. You can't push back as hard on vanity metrics because it's really difficult for you to be able to dig in and interrogate what's happening, because you're not really spending any time looking at the business's unit economics. What you're doing is you're talking about fluff pieces around the business as a whole. And frankly, the vanity metrics come into play because nobody actually wants to say the truth. Maybe you don't want to identify it out loud. Maybe your team doesn't want to be the bearer of bad news. Nobody wants to be the one that says, actually, this number doesn't mean anything. Actually, this doesn't tell us what to do. Actually, I can't take a decision from this. If they're in a room full of people that are like, yeah, traffic's up, high five, they're not going to be the ones to step out and say, hey, I understand that we're excited about the traffic, but the issue is that it's not creating conversions. They're the buzzkill. They're the ones that are kind of popping the balloon on the energy in the room, and they don't want to do it. So you've got to really make an environment where it's safe to communicate data, good, bad, and ugly. And what's rewarded is giving information that others can take decisions from to help the business go in the direction it wants to go. So now you might be wondering, what should I report? What should we be looking at from a data perspective? What should we be focused on? And now my first note of caution before I get into any of these things you could potentially be looking at is that if you do not understand it, do not track it. This is probably my most controversial piece of advice. Even I have a freebie that you can download from the show notes that will tell you the 5 things that I think that you should track. If you do not understand how to calculate them, what they are telling you, and what decisions to take from them, don't track them. You have 2 choices. You can either just not track them at all, or you can say, hey, I know that these are really important, and I need to educate myself on why before I use them. The choice is yours on which way you go with that, but I don't want you tracking something just because somebody told you to, and it's more meaningful, so they say, than what you're already tracking. You have to understand the metric. Now, one of the things that is talked about a ton right now is EBITDA. And EBITDA is something that is used in business valuation when a transaction is about to occur. Okay, so it's how you value a business. It's how companies that are buying other companies determine the multiple, which is maybe something you heard. Like, we're going to we're going to pay you 6 times EBITDA or 10 times EBITDA. And really what EBITDA is kind of the net value of the company. And there's a calculation to come up with what that actual number is. And I recommend that you don't pay attention to it unless you're planning to sell your business. If you are saying in the next 18 months, I want to sell my business, then EBITDA is really, really important because that's the basis for your sale number, right? It's the basis for the offers or the bids or how that's going to work. If you have no intention of selling your business anytime soon or ever, you do not need to worry about it. You do not need to understand the accounting behind the number calculation. You do not need to spend hours with your accountant and bookkeeper making sure that everything is categorized correctly. Do you if you want to sell? Yes. And if you and I were having a conversation about prepping for due diligence, then yes, that would be the thing. I did a mock due diligence with a client a few months ago, and the thing that we were driving to was the real, true EBITDA, so that they could enter into conversations with potential buyers. But if you are not in that situation, that is not something you need to understand. However, what you do need to understand are 2 things always: net margin and cash flow. And here is what I mean. So if you sell something for $1,000 and all in, the cost is $500 for you to make it, buy it, fulfill it, ship it, run it, etc. I'm talking all of the things. Then your net margin is $500. It was $500 to expenses and it's $500 you get to keep, okay? When we look at net margin of a business, let's say that you had $100,000 in revenue come in for the month of July. Fantastic. How much went out the door? If you collected $100,000, how much did you pay on advertising? How much did you pay on payroll? How much did you pay on contractors? How much did you pay in software? On travel, on and on and on and on and on, right? What's left? Whatever that number is, let's say there's $30,000 left after all of those things. Your margin's 30%. That's your net margin. That's a really healthy net margin, by the way. If you do all of that math and you come back and you're like, it's $1,000, that's what's left. You have a 1% net margin. 1%. That's not good. You might even have a negative net margin if you actually go through the math. Now, some businesses, it's okay to have 1 month negative and 1 month positive, and we can talk about that in a minute with the cash flow. But you want to understand your net margin, and you want to set a target for your net margin for the year. When you do that, you begin to make more informed decisions about what you spend your money on, where you invest your money, what you are doing with hiring and promotions and bonuses. Understanding what your net margin is and what your goal net margin is critical to making decisions in your business, pricing what you're selling, going into new markets or new verticals. You make all of those decisions based off of margin and the goal for margin. Now, the other thing that I talked to you about was cash flow. Now, this one is a little more difficult, but there is one trick that I recommend to everybody. We talked about it in the podcast last week. That is building a financial forecast. I know you want to fall asleep right now. I get it. This is not exciting. It's necessary. Every single one of our clients, when we come into their business, sooner or later, we introduce financial forecast. And what that is how much revenue do we expect to have come in month over month? Now, ideally, depending on the business, it's committed revenue. So we have a contract for it. It's accounts receivable, aging, it's those sorts of things. If it's not that, and it's a consumer packaged goods company, or it's another business where you have to make projections based off of what you think is going to happen based on historical information, that's fine too. Come up with how much revenue you think is going to come in the door every month. Pay attention to how much you think that you're going to need to spend based on that revenue. Figure out what your net margin is. Play with those numbers. And then what you're going to do every month is you're going to come back and you're going to put the actuals in. I thought we were going to do $100,000 in the month of July. We actually did 80. We were $20,000 off. So did we pull back on expenses by $20,000? Yes or no? Are we still okay? Or are we still not okay? And that's going to tell you what's happening with your cash. The cash flow view is how much cash you have coming into the business. It's almost how much cash is coming out. So if you create a forecast, then it's going to help you project. It's going to help you pull those levers in advance so that you are informed. For example, in the month of July for our business, we had a good amount of customer churn. Something that happens. We were still a very baby business. We literally just hit a year of other people besides me working with clients. So we're still learning a lot. And when that happened, what we were able to do was update our projections. We were able to see, okay, if revenue is going to go down, what we have to do? We have to pull back on ad spend. If revenue is going to go down, we're going to have to pull back on a couple of the other services that we had added on because we can't afford it right now. We were able to go back and make adjustments without panicking, without firing anybody, without having a panic attack about anything, because we knew what the outlook looked like. That is the value and the importance of having the right metrics, the right information, the right numbers in front of you. You can see what is happening and what actions you need to take, what decisions you need to take in order to grow the business and continue to make it go. So we just talked about two things that I would like you to look at: net margin and cash flow. Cash flow by way of projections is the easiest way to do that, or by way of forecast. And then the next thing that I want you to look at is the cost of customer acquisition. It's also known as CAC. So if you are spending money on paid advertising, it's relatively easy to calculate. You spent $10,000 in the month of July and you got 2 customers. That means it costs you $5,000 per customer to acquire them. That's it. That's the math. Are you okay with that? And the way that you know if you're okay with that is then you look at those customers and you say, how much are those customers worth? Now, if each customer was worth $5,000 to you, then that would mean that you broke even. You didn't make any money. You didn't lose any money, but you didn't make any money. If each of those customers was only worth $1,000 to you, that would mean you lost $4,000. Lost, never to regain again, $4,000. That tells you that you've got a problem with your customer acquisition channel and you need to go fix things ASAP. Now, if each customer makes you $500,000, then maybe what you need to know is I need to spend more money to acquire more customers, because if I can spend $5,000 to get a $500,000 customer, what am I even doing? Spend the money. Let's go. Put it all on black, right? Like, let's get it done. So you have to understand the lifetime value of a client to you, how much they're going to pay you over the lifetime that they are with you, and the CAC, how much it costs to acquire them. Now, you might be saying, I don't do paid advertising. Fantastic. But you do other things. There are other things that you invest in. There's either social that you're doing, or you're going to networking events, or you're speaking at conferences, or you've got some sort of referral situation going on. Whatever it is to acquire customers, it is costing you money. It just may be costing you money in labor or software or something else. So do the calculation and figure out what that is per customer. And if that is a number that makes sense, because you always get more money from the customer back than you do when you spend it on them. If you ever see you're spending more money to get a customer than they pay you in the whole life, you know you have a problem. If you look at nothing else in your business, look at this. This is actually more important than net margin, because if you are spending more money to get customers than they are paying you, you do not have a business. You have a charity. Literally is where you are. So you want to pay attention to that one all the time. Now, the last one that I want to talk to you about is the last thing I want to talk to you about is something that is harder to track. But this is how dependent the business is on you. And I like to do this via a time study. So what that looks like is over the course of the week, you actually track every time you take a decision and how long you spent taking that decision. And the more decisions you take, the more you are working inside of the business. And once you look at that across the board, I ask you to categorize your decisions in 2 ways. This is a strategic decision, or this is an operational decision. An operational decision is something that typically can be made by somebody else. So this is a $50 decision that you should not be making and you can delegate to somebody else. And so what you do is you look at it. And so let's say that you spent 10 hours last week taking decisions. And out of those 10 hours, 8 of those hours were for operational decisions. You have an 80% opportunity right now to get that off of your plate so that you can spend the rest of the time on strategy, on sales, on innovation, on whatever. So if you do this once a quarter and you pay attention to the sorts of decisions that you are taking every week, And then you take all of the operational ones and you hand them over to somebody else. You continue to fire yourself from roles and buy back your time, uplifting yourself, helping give you more time to grow the business. And the cycle continues on and on and on and on. The other thing that's really cool about this is that if you ever plan to sell your business, the business can't be dependent upon you. I always advise that for like the last 18 months before you put yourself up for sale, you basically exit the business and have everybody else run it. And that then demonstrates to future buyers that you're not needed, which is exactly what they want. It makes your business more valuable. And so if you start putting this practice into habit now, well before you ever want to sell your business, by the time you get there, you've already done this work. This is the hardest work to sell a business. It's getting yourself out of it is the hardest thing to do. Everything else is relatively easy to do. So this, even though it's a more difficult metric to track and it's something that's personal to you, it will move the needle the most overall for scaling and growing your business and having it be sustainable without you in the weeds every single day. So my recommendation to you is to go evaluate all of the data that you were using inside of your business, determine if it's data that you take decisions from or not. Anything that does not help you take a decision or take an action needs to be removed, and it needs to be replaced by real meaningful things that are going to help you decide and choose and steer your business for the long run. The goal isn't fewer metrics. It's metrics that could actually change what you are doing in the business. I hope this was helpful to you. And if you know any other business owners that are really struggling right now with how to determine what's happening in their business and how their business is performing, please share this podcast with them. And until I see you next time, please know you are wise, you are strong, and you're capable, and I believe in you.